Hi guys, a great number of people are deeply concerned and absolutely raging over comments Keir Starmer and his front bench have made since the beginning of the current Israeli-Palestinian crisis. The Labour leader on every occasion has repeated the line that Israel has the right to defend itself. Only recently he added the caveat that it should do so while respecting international law. However, his lack of condemnation of the airstrikes on Gaza and what is being seen as a siege of the northern part of the Strip has caused a bit of a split in his party. A number of Labour councillors say they've had enough and have left the party. But is this a problem for Starmer?
Yes, so James, I'm now an independent councillor here in the city of Oxford, where I was born and raised. So I was a Labour councillor up until last week. It was a real honour for me to be elected as a Labour councillor in the city I was born and raised in, where I went to school, where my family live. So this isn't a decision that I made lightly. However, I had no other choice. I'm a former international aid worker of 15 years. I've worked for Oxfam, Save the Children, MSF, all around the world. I've spent all my life advocating for humanitarian aid, access into conflict zones, and also for the upholding of international law. And the leader of my party went on national radio while I was at the party conference in Liverpool as well, to say, basically, he was implying that Israel had a right to cut off electricity, water, and gas and food from the besieged population of Gaza. Now, alongside my colleague, Dr. Amar Latif, we both wrote to the national and local representatives of our party here in Oxford to ask them if they could really clarify these comments. In the meantime, more and more front bench MPs were going on television and radio to say the same thing. We did not get a response from our leadership, and so we decided to resign with a heavy heart. Now, since then, and particularly this morning, Lisa Nandy, who's a woman I have immense respect for and is a Shadow International Development Secretary, no less, has been on the BBC where she was asked multiple times by Victoria Derbyshire if she condemned effectively collective punishment of civilians in Gaza, and whether she was against Israel withholding those services, water, gas, electricity, and food. And she couldn't give a response. I think it's absolutely incredible that almost 2 weeks into this horrifying conflict, where Israelis are mourning their children and the people that have been killed in terrorist attacks by Hamas, and indeed waiting for their hostages to be returned, and increasing numbers of civilians are dying in Gaza, that this is the sort of line that's coming from potentially our next future government. And our government's doing no better. Meanwhile, in Israel, where people are mourning and where they are scared and where they are trying to hide from Hamas rockets, there's more call for peace. There is more call for, justice for Israelis and Palestinians. And for those of us who don't live in Israel or Palestine, for those of us who are outside of that context, we need to be really aware of what we're saying and what we're doing. So I, in good consciousness, could no longer stay as a representative of the Labour Party, and I had no choice.
I fully respect her decision to do that. And coming from a background of human rights and traveling around the world and making sure that they are enforced, obviously this is somebody who is deeply concerned about what's happening in Israel and Palestine and is deeply concerned about the people on the ground there, and that humanitarian aid gets in and that whatever siege that is taking place ends, and that the people are able to have a period of peace. Now, more on the political aspect of this. So is this going to have an impact on Keir Starmer? No, not really. Now, at the moment, I don't think it's going to have an impact. This could change depending on how the crisis evolves. What I'm talking about is, because she's a councillor, and I think another few councillors as well have joined her and have resigned, they're not MPs. So they're not members of parliament, so the impact they're going to have directly on Keir Starmer is extremely limited. It will create a bit of trouble for him, but I don't think it's going to be anything that he's going to lose sleep over. Because they're councillors, they're not members of parliament. Now, as I said, if this were to, if this were to evolve and the situation in Gaza becomes more desperate, there could be pressure being applied to MPs, left-wing MPs within the Labour Party, to resign also. This would put pressure on Starmer to respond. But at the moment, I don't see that happening. Now, there's also another problem, and this is a problem with the media. what's happening at the moment in Gaza and Israel is front and center. I've noticed also that the amount of following that it's receiving is already declining. So people are moving on to other topics. This, unfortunately, is the reality. Something is front and center for a few days or maybe even a few weeks, and then gradually the public lose interest. And unfortunately, I think for some of the councillors who have resigned here and made this bold decision to do it, and I respect them for making that decision, unfortunately, because the general election is probably a year away at least, the impact on Keir Starmer is going to be even more limited. So if Starmer's worried about the general election and worried about losing MPs at this moment, he might do something. But because the general election is so far out, he's not concerned about this. He probably feels that this issue within the media will be resolved. So, of course, the issue between the struggle and the crisis that's existing at the moment in the Middle East will not be resolved. But the media will no longer be focusing on it, the British media. So Starmer is probably in a position where he says, well, look, there's no point getting too involved in this because it'll be forgotten about later on. I hate to use this language, but unfortunately, this is the reality. So he's not concerned for two reasons. Once again, that these are councillors, not MPs, and that this is an issue media-wise that will be resolved sometime soon. Maybe not resolved, but will be forgotten about. So he won't be impacted. Now, once again, this could change, and if the situation in Gaza becomes extremely desperate, there could be pressure on MPs, supporters, putting pressure on MPs to resign, and then this could change Starmer's mind. But at the moment, I don't see that happening. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.